I've recently had an idea to create a story using my Minecraft world. I've spent 4 months and nearly 1,000 days in-game creating some of my favorite builds ever. Since I started this new world, my mindset has really changed on what I want to accomplish with each build and video. Starting today, I want each build to serve a larger purpose, to really expand on the idea of world building. Starting this new journey of mine, I'm going out west to create a mining village to tell a story about how the people in this region gather resources. Mining villages are a critical part of any medieval economy. Acquiring resources like iron, copper, silver, and gold were necessary to create tools, armor, currency, and even to build houses. Before I can focus on expanding my world, I need to expand my paper and gunpowder count, as today's project will require many items. And I've gotten to that point in my world where I pretty much fly everywhere I go. So after a bit of time slaughtering creepers and gathering paper, I had enough rockets to last me for at least this project. This brings me to my next problem though, I'm running out of storage. Minecraft has a serious inventory problem, and with the block count going up for each project, I'm quickly running out of places to store all of the items I hoard, so I traveled to the end and got about a stack of shulker shells, so I can further fuel my addiction of placing boxes on the ground and never picking them up again. Now that I have another episode shulker monster ready, I can start gathering resources for the mining village. My first stop was next to my house in the mega taiga to gather up spruce wood that I was going to use for roofs, and also the new shelf block, which ends up being one of the main focuses of today's episode, but I'll talk more about that later. After filling up a shulker box of spruce wood, I traveled to where I'm going to be building the mining village, as I unintentionally planned the village right on top of one of the craziest caves I've ever seen. Tuff is one of my favorite blocks in the entire game, and after I saw this gigantic cave, I knew this would be a perfect spot to find these large tuff deposits. So after a couple close calls with the warden and a zombie, I traveled out to the far west part of my world. Trust me, I wouldn't spend this much time gathering mangrove wood if there wasn't a very specific reason. Mojang just created one of the best building blocks we've ever seen, and it covers all of the wood variants. This block has changed the way I build trees, tables, and wardrobes, or whatever this thing is. It also gives you the ability to create planters, and more planters, I guess, if that's something you're into. Staying out west, I gathered some dry grass as it looks so good mixed in with the other foliage blocks. I then traveled a bit further east to get some jungle wood, and I even got lost and took a wrong turn into a mysterious temple in the middle of the jungle. To build up some of the village paths, I gathered some brown mushroom, as it looks like some really packed down variation of the packed mud and rooted dirt, which looks great for your standard dirt path. With my trip out west finished, I traveled back closer to home to the village of Village Town. The villagers were about as dumb as the guy who came up with the name Village Town. I mean, who the hell came up with that name? Stopping by the village reminded me that I had a couple friends that I left there from episode 1, and I knew just the right spot to put these guys. With my trip to Village Town over, I traveled to a dimension that was a bit more lighthearted and friendly to gather up the final block I needed for both houses and a bit of terraforming I had planned. But now that I am done collecting the materials, I am left here with this gigantic shulker monster with all of the materials I'm gonna need. Now the next step is I want to completely terraform this landscape, as I'm gonna turn this entire area into a big old quarry, which means I'm going to need to flatten out this area quite a bit. Now, I do have this big shulker monster, but this isn't all of the materials I need. With me completely terraforming this area, I also want to add in some foliage, which means I'm going to need to create some automatic farms, because I need quite a lot. Whenever I'm creating a village, I love to fit it into the environment, and that's best done with ferns, grass, and the new bush blocks, and for that, I need bone meal. So I spent the night brainstorming how I was going to acquire that much bone meal, and I had an idea. So in order to give myself some bone meal, I'm going to use this side of the moss farm. So I placed the composters. I think if I just place a few chests along here with hoppers facing into them, this should give me a pretty good amount of bone meal from when the moss farm has ran in the past. So the moss farm's been going for a few seconds, and we have a decent amount of bone meal, but I'm probably going to come back here in a few minutes and check up on the rates. In the meantime, I want to create an automatic farm that gives me infinite ferns that I can use on any of my future builds. I also wanted to design a build around the farm, so I felt better about myself when I had to reuse it, and I had the perfect spot. I chose a random house in the farming village and decided to dig out a pretty sizable basement so I could create a room for the automatic fern farm. So I've added in the main staircase to go down, and I want to create a kind of arched shape roof for the main basement corridor, just using some tough blocks. So what I can do is I can punch this wall out by a single block, and then I can make the wall tough, and then I can go through with some of the tough stairs and place it on either side. And then for the roof, I was thinking of going up with some slabs here at the top, and that looks pretty good. I now have the entrance done and I have the basement laid out. Now it's time to create the farm. So I've completely revamped the cellar down here. I added in some barrels for some storage, and then I added in the section where the fern farm is. I mean, I guess I kind of made this basement like a wine cellar thing with these shelves, but I absolutely love the new shelf block. It looks so good. And going in the fern farm, it's pretty humble in here. It's not the greatest looking thing in the world, but to turn it on, there's actually a little hole in the wall right here. And then boom, you can turn it on. Sounds great. You gotta close yourself in the closet, put the ferns in your offhand, and you can just kind of spam this. I think there's a way to get them to place automatically and break automatically, but this isn't the greatest thing in the world. With this out of the way though, I want to make another automatic farm. With the fern farm complete, I took the long journey just next door to create the other farm. That took like 5 seconds. This farm though, I think is pretty simple. If I just grab one of the bushes from in here, I think I just place it on that right side, and then I fill these up with bone meal, which I do have plenty of from the moss farm. So I can put a few stacks in here, and then a few stacks in the other dispenser, and then I even have the on and off switch. That is working perfectly, and I think for this I just need silk touch, and then I can get an absolute ton of the bush block, which is absolutely amazing. I need about 3 stacks, and just from that we have a stack in 17, so I'm gonna run this farm for a little bit longer. And just like that, I have just about 3 stacks of the firefly bush. Now the only thing I need for this episode is a ton of short grass, which is a little bit more complicated to get. You see, the fern farm that I made is actually capable of getting the short grass because the tall grass would grow up, and then I would break it and get 2 for every bone meal. With the way grass works, obviously bone mealing one area gives you an absolute ton of grass. The only thing is there is a lot of flowers. The only way for me to get a lot of short grass to grow without flowers was to travel to a place where flowers don't grow, which took me on a journey back to the west into the Badlands. And yeah, see, it just gives normal grass, which is exactly what I want. And then what I have to do is just manually collect it all with my shears, so I'm gonna be here for a little bit longer. Ideally, you put a dispenser maybe right here, which I do actually have, and then I would place it here, maybe put some bone meal in it, and then I would create maybe a little redstone to connect it with a lever, which would bone meal it. And that's fine, but it's not very efficient, so eventually I'm gonna have to make a farm for this, but for now, this will kind of work. After finally gathering all of the materials for the mining village, I'm now able to jump right into the first building phase of today's episode, which is actually not building at all, but instead is the mandatory terraforming phase of each video, as right now my goal is to level out the land to make it easier to travel on, with a central path through the village to make the space walkable. I'm currently a few hundred blocks away from where I set up my main settlement, as I wanted to escape from all of the deep dark, so the spot between the small lake and the ocean seemed perfect to put the mining village. Now up here, I want to create the first actual mine, as there is a tiny mine entrance right here. Not really much going on just yet, but of course I have to create an actual quarry, which is what I want this area to be, which is kind of like a step, similar to what I did at the castle last episode. So I want to have different levels of land where they could be mining resources from. And I want these rocky cliffs to be mainly made out of tough blocks. But I do want to mix in some darker tones using some basalt and some regular deep slate, and then some highlights I want to use some andesite and stone. I also thought it would fit the area well if I used some of the dead fire coral. Lastly, I need an absolute ton of mossy cobblestone as well, as kind of a mid-tone. For the hillside, I had a lot of fun coming up with the proper shape to make this area look like a real quarry. I used some inspiration images to get the colors and shapes right for the rocks. I saw a lot of smaller rocks at the base of the main rocks in the images I saw, so I decided to put those in to give the area a more realistic look. This quarry was a really big step in my ability to texture and terraform. For a long time, I knew it wasn't great to add a lot of noise, but this took that a step further, as I didn't really add a ton of block variation either. And I will say, this is probably the best terraforming I've ever done. After an entire day though, I now have the quarry hills put in. I'm not sure if these are technically hills or just large rocks, but I do really like the texturing that I put in. And all of the colors worked well together, and it's not very noisy, and I think that this texturing looks a lot better than some of the other texturing that I've done before. And I've decided to go in and add walls as well to kind of smooth out the terrain a bit, and this actually goes a very long way when you're putting in terrain. Didn't really do it much down here, but if I go and step on in the lowest section, it just creates again that very smooth texture without it having a ton of harsh points. And I think that this just honestly looks very, very nice. Now over here, of course, I said there was going to be the mine entrance, but before I get started on that, I have a couple houses that I want to put right here along the main path. For this house, I want to start with a strong foundation. So right now I'm using a deep slate and acacia mix, as well as some tuff, and I also wanted to go around with some of the dead brain coral. You can already see this is forming a nice gradient, but right here I want to put in a window using some oak trapdoors and some spruce trapdoors as shutters. And then for the highlight of the build, I want to use some of the mossy cobblestone. And then lastly, what I want to do is I want to put a spruce sign beam going around the entire build. And now I have completed the main foundation of the build. I've put the spruce sign trim around the entire way, and the texturing is looking very, very good. Going up to the next level, I'm actually going to be using some brown wool. Now this is a very odd block, but I have a pretty interesting building technique that I want to use for this top section. Now for the next part, I'm gonna need a very specific block. In this shulker box, I have a ton of light gray banners. And with banners, what you can actually do is place them on the side of the block, and you can create a kind of custom Tudor style texture using them. Now for this, I'm actually going to need a little bit of brown dye, and to be honest, I kind of forgot to gather some of that. Going back home, I have 9 cocoa beans in here, and then I should have a little bit of bone meal back at the mining village. I also do have a little bit of jungle log as well, and I'm just going to go ahead and plant some of the cocoa beans that I have, as I again need a little bit of brown dye. So now what I can do, now that I'm back over here at this house, is if I put a light gray banner in the loom that I made, I can create this brown cross. And this creates a nice Tudor, and with the brown in the background, it'll blend in even more. So if I go ahead and make 2 of these, I should be able to put them on top of each other just like that. And again, you can see the line connecting, and then at the bottom, you still have a line to extend that Tudor style down here using the brown wool. And if you do this around the entire build, it looks pretty nice. Using some gray dye, I tried to add a bit of a shadow to the banner to break up from the light gray color. I added an oak trapdoor window and went around to the front of the house to break up the color a bit using the spruce shelf block. And now the front of the build does have a slightly different texture, or very different texture than the side, but that is pretty normal. And then out front, I can create some small bushes. And then along the back, I want to add in a small sort of storage section using some dark oak slabs and some fences. And I was thinking for in here, I was going to just put in some small storage for some wood. And they can use this maybe for their chimney or just to have some firewood. And then I was going to put some barrels here along the edge for some extra storage. Along the right side, I haven't added in that Tudor section because I want to extend this side of the build out using some wood. And I love the shelf block texture to create actual walls for houses. And I want this extension to end about right here. And then I'm just going to go up again 2 more blocks. Now for this side, I do want to put these shelves along the inside just to get a different texture. As you can see, this side of the shelf block still looks really, really nice. And then this one has that sort of extension out a bit and also looks very nice as well. But what I can do now is I can put some stairs, and the reason I wanted this shelf block to be facing this way is the shelf would actually be extending out a little bit too far with the roof in, so I think this just looks a little bit better. And now we have the extension on the house, and the shelf block is carrying this build so hard. But what I can do is kind of plop in a window right here, and if I fly on inside, I can put an oak trap door again. And then I guess if I want to do the interior, I'll just punch out a little bit of a wall right here. Something I could do though, just to give it a little bit more texture, is I can put some signs going around it, and we'll see what that looks like. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. So now we have this side of the build done, but I did still want to add a little bit of that Tudor style along the top. It's not going to look as good because it's very hidden, but I can still do it. From over here though, I think that looks really awesome, especially with the texturing with the gray in there. I think that just makes it look a little bit less plain if it was just the light gray wool. The last thing I want to put here though is a lantern, because I do not do a good job of lighting up my builds, so I'm going to try to do that this episode. And I guess I can put another one here around the back as well. So right now there is this space right here for another building. To the left of the first house on the main road, I'm going to create another smaller house, starting with a stone foundation. For this house, I created a darker base using tuff, and went up to the lighter tones using some andesite, wool, and cobblestone. I added in some spruce accents to the build, and finished it off with a wooden roof. For this house, I want to give them a space to maybe cook some food outside, so I'm going to give them a campfire site on this big kind of stone platform that I made here. And I also want to just give them a place to cook some food right here. So I think what I can do is I can lower this down by another block, and then I can put maybe some campfires down here with some mangrove roots on top of them. And then what I can do is I can put some spruce fences with some chains over top of it. And the smoke won't go through a ton, but it looks as if maybe there is some food that they just recently cooked, so there's some smoke right there just for a little bit of movement. And I think that's looking very cool right here, and actually a decent amount of smoke is coming through, and I think that looks pretty cool. And of course they do just need a little bit of firewood out here, so I'm going to give them some firewood. And out front I made this little planter. I can just go ahead and put a couple ferns in here and bone meal that, and now this house is pretty much complete. It's a bit simple, but I think it fits the vibe, and I think it's looking very nice to have these two houses sort of in the middle of the road. But what I did for this house is I did something a little unique for it, and I made a basement. So right here you can just go down, and then I created a sort of cellar with some extra food, maybe some apples in here, just a place where they can store some of their items, maybe for the winter, as it would probably be a bit colder underneath the ground a little bit. This is a mining village. People live here. They also need a place to store their food for the winter. I decided I wanted to rain pretty hard for this next section, but what I want to do is I want to create some scaffolding up here, and I want to go up with some walls with a barrel on top of it, and I want to connect them at the top to create some support using some hanging signs. And because it's at a slight angle, I'm going to have to curve it just slightly, but they're not connected. What I want to do is go up with some dark oak signs just to blend it in a little bit more and add a bit of contrast. So I think that's looking pretty good. To give people a way up, I want to create a ladder, and for this I actually just want to use some of the dark oak hanging signs. And now I don't really love the chain like that, so I think I'm gonna have to place it on the side of the spruce block, just going all the way up. And yeah, I think that looks a little bit better. What I want to do now is I want to create some supports using some spruce slabs, and then I want to go and use some trapdoors and create a line that goes every other block. So I'm going to alternate between the slabs and trapdoors. And since this doesn't connect, there's a bit of a gap. What I can do is place the trapdoors on top of that. And then because the ladder doesn't connect, I am just going to use a spruce pressure plate. I finished the foundation of the scaffolding and then built up another smaller section with a couple mine entrances. This wandering trader scared the living crap out of me, ran up on me while I was building the mine. But I now have 3 layers of scaffolding, I think, technically. With the second layer, I put in a couple of mine entrances. This one using some black concrete to make it look like it goes way deep in there. And then this one's kind of collapsed. Also put in some ores as well to make it seem like they're extracting maybe some of the granite and some iron. And then down here, I actually used some stained glass to make it look like there's a little bit of cave fog coming through here as well. To fill in some of the space, I also want to build a couple of carts to make it look like the area has people working. With a couple small details out of the way, I want to better fit the build into the landscape. So I grabbed some of these shulker boxes of grass, ferns, dry grass, and firefly bushes and started placing them around to give the area a more natural look. If you're making a build, I highly recommend using a mix of all of these foliage blocks to make the area around feel a lot more natural. Moving down the path to the bottom of the village, I got started on the next house, creating a foundation. For the second level, I want to work up with some lighter stone textures, which will just feature some cobblestone, some wool, and the cracked stone bricks. Usually for windows, I'd use trapdoors for the window shutters, but I kind of want to use some of the barrels to get that side texture right here, which looks really cool. And then I can add a little bit of depth to that using a sign, and I think that'll look very nice. But I want to continue with these lighter tones around the rest of the build. And again, I want to add in a few extra windows around the build as well. After establishing the base of the build, I created the second level and then added a spruce roof. So now I kind of have the base shape done. I don't know what is happening in here. Where did the wandering trader even go? Oh. Well, I just witnessed a death right in front of me. It's fine, I need the lead. With the base shape in though, I want to wrap signs around it just to break up from the dark and light tones from the top and bottom of the build. This seriously just makes the building look 10 times better. Now that I have that in, I want to put in some levers just to act as supports for the roof. And I can do that every 2 blocks or so. Now I want to add some wooden beams, and to be honest, I would do this with fences normally, but with the new banner tech, I think this looks much better. I think this is looking very good. I really like the use of the signs. And for some reason these guys like it as well. Also, I said signs, I meant banners. I think the banners look very good along the edge of the build. Now something else I wanted to do is I kind of wanted to use shelves as like a fence right here. And the cool thing about the shelf block is you can kind of curve it back a little bit like this. So it has that slight curve to it. And I can actually maybe put a spruce sign in here as well just to curve it a little bit more. After creating my wandering trader planter at the front of the house, I went to the left side to create a small backyard. For this house, I liked the idea of giving them a space in the back where they could be doing some gardening. These guys are some tough guys in the coal mines, but they also could have a side hobby. Speaking of side, I went to the right side of the house to quickly build up the village smithy. I had planned this village a while ago before the shelves released, and there's still shelves absolutely everywhere. I used it for this planter, I used it for these window shutters, and I used it again for this small extension of the building. The block is just so good. I cannot get over how good the shelf block is. And I'm going to use these shelves even more because I want to put a large blacksmith furnace out here along the edge of the build. And I say I'm going to use the shelves more because I want to use these shelves as beams for the blacksmith sort of roof, as I want to make a roof over here that's extended out towards the building. So along with these shelves, what I've done is I've created a sort of gazebo thing here along the side with the roof and then some supports up at the top using the spruce stairs and the slabs. And what I can do is I can also punch some of these shelves out and replace them with some trapdoors and some spruce signs just to make it look a little bit more aged. So I've grabbed some magma blocks and I want to use this as the base for the furnace, and then I want to go around with some tough walls to create a circle, and then to extend it out a little bit more to hide the magma, I'm going to use some of the gray stained glass panes. And then I want to extend this up even more with some full blocks just to give it more of a rounded shape. Now I've extended the top of the chimney even further, and up here I've created the top of it using some walls, and I think that's looking pretty good here on the outside of the building. Something else I wanted to do was add in some of the copper chains, because they almost look like normal chains that are just glowing, so I feel like they fit in the build and they look pretty cool. I went ahead and added some more details to the smithy to make the place feel more alive. I also went back to the other house and added a couple of smoke trails from the chimneys. So far in this episode, I've already spammed a new shelf block around, and there's been so many different uses for it. This new update is pretty awesome. And to be honest, I think this bench design I came up with is the perfect use for the new shelf block. And the reason I'm putting this here is because I want to actually put in a large tent and then a couple of small tents right here to make it look like maybe some lords and ladies are coming through and stopping by the farming village, maybe to check up on the rates or something. I honestly don't know the exact reason I wanted to put a tent in a village. Right now I'm creating the Lord's Chambers though, as if there's someone very important staying on the grounds of the mining village. This was a pretty unique way of adding some lore to the world. I'm not exactly sure why someone would be here, especially someone of importance, but this could be a stop on their way to somewhere even more important than the mining village, maybe somewhere I haven't even built yet. I also decided to put in some of these fire pit thingies around for some heat and some light, maybe when it gets dark. And I think these look very nice as well. The dark oak looks so good. But going into the main tent right here, this one does feel extremely royal, as if somebody very important is staying in here. We got some like house banner designs and then some big flags up top. But going in here, there is even more dark oak, and I mean, again, the dark oak shelf to make shelves without actually making them shelves, if that makes sense. This looks so nice as like a wardrobe, and then we actually have some shelves back here. Also use the shelf block to make some chairs, and this big chair right here, which is looking very nice. And a little detail I added, was this little map. And yeah, this turned out very nice. I really like the interior of this. But now that I have this done, I want to get started on the next phase of the project, which is actually right in front of me. I want to build another quarry, this one being right in the middle of the village. It felt like the village would be a little too boring if there wasn't a giant hole in the middle of it. This is also a pretty quintessential part of any mining village, of course that being the big quarry deep in the ground. This was a pretty big chunk of land to terraform, so carrying the stone and dirt down 10 to 12 blocks took me a couple hours. After completing the dig, I textured up the walls to fit in with the rocks I made earlier for the top side. Who would have thought that the mining village episode would require me to mine a bunch of blocks? Definitely not me, but I have now the second part of the quarry put in, this lower section, which is looking very nice. Right now though, I have this giant space laid out underneath here where people could be mining at a lower Y level. Maybe there's different minerals or ores down here like there is in Minecraft. I want to have a platform that is extended out, connected back to this road that I have right here. And I also want to put an elevator so people can get up and down much easier. The first thing that I want to do is I want to create some scaffolding. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the mud brick and the granite to go up a bit. And then to mix in a little bit of texturing, I'm going to go up with some more jungle fences. So at the top of this block, I want to create the actual platform for the elevator, just using some spruce slabs, and then I want to put some signs underneath it, just to give it a little bit more of an interesting shape. This could be used for people to get up and down, and then also if they want to bring materials up and down. And then I want to use some iron chains, I guess is what they're called now, to act as, obviously, the chains to lift it up and down. Now, I built this part of this before they actually introduced this chain, so if I could find a way to mix these in, I might do that, but I don't know if that's gonna look good. So let me just experiment with this a little bit. Maybe once they oxidize, it'll actually look a little bit nicer. I also crafted up some grindstones because these work perfectly with chains if you want to use them as kind of a lift looking mechanism thingy. And that's because right now I'm building up some logs to make it look like these things, maybe like the chain is kind of wrapped around them just to lift it up and down. So I want to use the oak log to go across the top, and then I can always mix in some of the spruce and jungle wood. Now with that in, if I just go and put my elytra on, I can put the grindstone underneath it to act as if it's like a pulley system. I've built up this platform a bit more, putting in some trapdoors and some slabs. But what I want to do next is I want to actually make it look like you can turn this system on and off. The idea I had in mind was just using a lever right here to make it look like it's connected to that log, and then connecting it back with some chains. And then I have a oak trapdoor that I want to put right here to make it look like a wheel that could spin and move a bunch of things around. I don't really know and then a flower pot on top of that, just to make it look like it's standing up a little bit more to get that side of the wall texture, just so it doesn't look like it's going out like that. Just thought that looked a little bit nicer. So here's the elevator design. I reworked it a little bit from what I had planned out initially, but I do think it looks pretty good. But I think this will give me a better angle, and I honestly like it quite a bit. The only thing is, for some reason, I didn't connect that back on another pillar, so I think I'm going to build one of those up real quick as well. Now it actually has a support on this side. That is looking a lot better. But again, I wanted to connect it back here to create almost an L shape, and then I want to put a ladder to connect back to this area. I guess this guy didn't realize that I just put an elevator in, because he just decided to jump down completely, and he broke that guy's legs. But don't ask him about it. It's a touchy subject. Now, again, there is some spots right here. There's a few mine entrances that I want to build now. So let me hop on down here to make the first mine entrance. Also, I think one of these guys made a weird noise, and I have an echo mod, like a sound physics mod, so it just echoed throughout this entire thing. I've cleared out this space to make it look like they are maybe beginning a new mine section, or they tore out some of the materials that they actually wanted to get. But I did want to add a little bit of decoration in here, just so it's not super boring. And for this, I just wanted to make a pretty simple table design with some candles on top of it. So there we have a little bit of light. And again, I've really loved using the walls as a terraforming block. I don't know why I've never done this before, but it just looks so good. Sometimes you just gotta stop overthinking it, and you can make something that looks a lot better than what you've usually been doing. This guy needs to stop. I think he's just playing around with the echo location or something. Me. This guy's probably on his last life. One more hit and he's dead. I'm not gonna do it. He's in my face. I'm trying to build the next part of the mine. He's trying to get his revenge. Oh, I just built this up, man. So far, I built up this small mining section. I put a tiny table with a lantern on it, and I wanted to punch out this wall that I put right here to be maybe the prison cell. And since this actually connects to the hole that's right here, I might make it so there's a hole in the prison cell. Maybe the person escaped or something. That could be kind of fun. So now I have something built up that looks pretty nice, and I want to use the copper bars, I guess. I can experiment with this a little bit. They're very, very bright. I don't know if that works super well, but if they H down, maybe this will work. So there we go. I guess it's kind of a little bit of like a world building thing. Ooh, I kind of just randomly decided to put some iron chain things right here, and this actually looks pretty cool. Definitely looks a little bit spookier with that. I like that. So there we go. We have a little bit of a mine. Now the next thing I wanted to do is going to require a little bit more digging, and I want to take this mine all the way over to where I have the giant pit that I showed a few minutes ago. And it'd be cool for me to expand this eventually and create like a giant mining system. I think that'd be really cool. I haven't really done much strip mining in this world, so I think the next time I gather materials, I might expand this somewhere down so I can actually do some strip mining. But now that I have that done, what I want to do is get started on making some custom trees. I know I said I was going to build some custom trees, but give me just 1 second to build up a small grass field next to the main paths. I have no idea what these things are called, to be honest. It looks cool though. Right next to the field, I wanted to put a birch tree that was split up into 2 main sections to almost look as if they were 2 trees that somehow connected. Using the shelf block, walls, fences, and pretty much every block in the game, I got a really cool shape. Moving down the path next to the first house I made, I created a halfway dead tree to really get that sort of chaotic feel you see out in nature. And it turned out really good. Don't mind these trees. There was a large oak tree on the top of the hill that I wanted to keep for the thumbnail, but instead I increased the scale very slightly to create a pretty large custom oak tree to really help with the sightline of the village. And this one, I really like. I have no idea what I want to do next in my world, so leave some comments suggesting some video ideas, please. I've run out of ideas. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!